confirmation. You guys are all good?
Yes,
okay,
looks good.
Thanks for the heads up here. All right, let's get back to where we were here. Okay, so we're going to move on. So we have Teams as your single pane of glass. And that's really the premise of the conversation, and ways you can leverage Teams to structure some of those repeatable processes that you have for project management at your organization. And what I like about Teams is just the interface really lends itself very naturally to being able, with the tabs at the top, to allowing you to structure the different components of your project, and also have links to some of the external resources that you have in your project management lifecycle that that you can save as saved links, essentially keeping everyone together from that single pane of glass within the project and within the channel. So the anatomy of a project, right? We often have tasks, and there's assignments, checklists, and sub level detail within the task structure. You have your project plan and the calendar organization of a level of effort, timeline, how long something is going to take, your work breakdown structure, and then resourcing and budget. Ways that you can manage and track the maturity of your budgeting and how well you're keeping to that budget. And then we have conversations, and that's a really nice piece to the Teams interface that I think conversations and discussions and the threaded discussions that you have within the team are actually so much more effective, and the interface is a lot more conducive than if you think back to previous versions of SharePoint when you had that discussion web part in there that nobody ever really used. And then finally, probably the most valuable piece to the team and for your project management would be to have that document repository. So like I mentioned before, there are different types and scales of different projects. Whenever I talk with different clients about Teams and how they can leverage Teams and how best to mature and advance the way they use Teams, project management always comes up as a great and easy win to help create better organization and increase the speed and consistency with which projects are managed and organized. However, not every project and not every company does everything identical. And even within Avanade, the way we run projects, though we have a high level structure to the way we run projects, each team is empowered to do it a little bit differently. So there are big and little projects. There are milestone deliverables. There can be a process that needs to be followed in a waterfall fashion. Sometimes it's agile. There's also resource management and then tasks. And what I find in a lot of companies is, even though all of these pieces are varied, they are often leveraging a completely separate application to handle and to automate and to keep these pieces organized, thus kind of making it a little confusing to have so many different applications that you're using to manage your projects. So just kind of from the get-go, using Teams out of the box, really simple to just set this up and to start leveraging Teams for project management. And I'm sure that many of you are already doing that as well. But you can leverage your conversations for context. And what I love about conversations and the threaded nature of or the persistent nature of these threaded conversations is that you can be invited to a team midway through, or a project midway through, see the conversation history, and you can see what questions, what posts, what announcements were made for the life cycle of the project. And it's not just a one-off chat that someone had, but the information is there for anyone who's a part of the project to consume. And so you keep everybody on the same page, and it's a nice interface that keeps everyone together. Documents, I think, has undisputed value in keeping a project together. We have tasks. You can add a planner to a tab within your channel as a way of managing tasks and assignments. And then there's also scheduling. You can create a calendar list and add that to your tab for calendar view. And then adding any of the additional tabs for specialization. And so just from the get-go, from out of the box, this is just a really simple rubric for kind of getting started or trying out and using Teams for your project management needs. And so then we have meetings and assets in Teams. So types of meetings, you can have private meetings, channel meetings, meet now. I think the best thing about channel meetings is the consistency and the persistence of the chat. So for whatever chat is occurring during the meetings, that is staying with the channel and all of the members of the channel. And so you have another method of persistent conversation where folks are staying together. And so even though the meeting ends, the conversation can continue. And also the the meeting can end, the conversations can continue, and then you can also leverage features like loop and whatnot to set agendas and have those persistently running while everyone is collaborating either asynchronously or together. And so one of the things that my team has started doing is we leverage our channel meetings for our weekly sales and talent connects, and we leverage a loop agenda every single week, and it's open and out there for anyone to add additional items to. And then during the meeting, we add action items, and it's easy for us to follow up and provide updates through the loop right in that meeting chat. So then there's also the ability to take meeting notes, and you can have that either in the chat or you can leverage a OneNote tab in your channel that allows you to keep a persistent shared OneNote notebook for the team so that all of the notes can be collected together and stayed and maintained in that channel. So there are so many apps out there that do project management. And I've done my best. And these are all applications that my clients use. And I worked with, I was just working with a fast food chain here in the United States, and they were looking to consolidate their project management apps. They had probably most of this list where their teams are using one of these or they have some level of subscription to each of these different cloud services. And they're using each of these in some capacity to project and program management within their organization. There's no right or wrong way. And, the conversation that we had together is each one of these has some strengths and they have some weaknesses. And depending on, what your requirements are, what your company likes to do, what you're looking to manage, each one of these has a place and a time that can help you with the type of project that you're managing. So I will say that for most of these, there is some sort of Teams connector in each of these different apps. But in most circumstances that we see for program and project management in Teams, it's generally not Teams alone that's being used for project management. There's usually one of these other applications that kind of come into the fold that are being used or leveraged for scheduling, for agile management, for whatnot. And so I'm not here to say that one is better than the other. I think it really is it depends kind of situation and what works best for you. But I would say be critical about the Teams connectors and be critical about the level of integration that each of these has within Teams. And that should be a solid part of your evaluation process and whether or not these tools are going to be helpful for you and be sustainable and easy for your user base to consume. And so as you start thinking about what might our team's project management template look like, or what would the team's project template look like for this team, for development, or for the PMO group, or for CMMI, or for a lot of other different purposes, specialized purposes. Think about, as you evaluate these tools, the level of integration that they have within teams, and if it's easy to use, if the authentication carries over, if you get to own the data ultimately that you create and store within each of these different apps. And I guess the last piece that I'll say about the North American or the United States fast food chain that I was working with on these, having a perspective on the type of project management that you're doing is really important. And having those tools and being very prescriptive about when to use what tool is really important for user adoption and making sure that there is consistency in the way people are managing projects. And that's to say, not everything has to be the same or consistent across your organization. It could be very department, it could be very team specific, but make sure that there is some governance designed around how that is managed. So we come to the ever lasting question: what is your desired user experience? So we often come at these as IT problems for or IT questions for business problems. And so I kind of ask you this in thinking about how you want project management to run in teams. Is it a single pane of glass? Is that the objective of using Teams as your project management platform? Is it the features of a particular tool? Say that you really like Asana, or you really like Smartsheets. Are there features within that tool that really meet certain requirements that you have? And that's the reason why you want to do this. Is the motivation automation? Is the motivation to save some time after repetitive steps that that the project manager or a scheduler has to manage? Is it working with external partners outside of your organization and managing projects with those folks? Is it agile? Is it waterfall? Are there more tasks than schedule? Or is it more task managed versus having a schedule and an actual project flow over a period of time? So I think that there are a lot of questions that you can kind of ask yourself, and this kind of helps to lead to what is the type of project that you're looking to design. So I'm going to talk back to the example that I was giving with this fast food chain in the United States. As we were sorting through the plethora of applications that they use for project and program management in their company, we started to talk and dive a little bit deeper into the reasons why and the strengths of each of those different applications for different types of projects. And so we started talking about development and the IT team and their need for Agile. And that team really needs Jira or Azure DevOps because that's managing their sprint schedules. They're able to create their epics and stories, and they do their issue tracking through those tools. And those tools are fantastic for those purposes. And so maybe that is a definition for, project definition for one type of template. There's also lightweight task management. Do you and your team just need a better way of understanding who's on second, who's on third, and who's blocking and tackling at home plate? Understanding what those pieces are and just having a lightweight tool that is easy to use can be, has a place and a time within teams as well. Then there's waterfall. some projects are inherently designed to be more waterfall oriented. Like it or not, my world still consists of a lot of SharePoint migration projects. And as agile as we try to make those, they still end up being a very waterfall type engagement. And it's just the nature of the work. It has a beginning, it has an end, and there are preceding activities that must take place in order to begin the work. And so in that waterfall sequence, we don't typically leverage a tool like Jira or Azure DevOps as much because the management of the work is, it lends itself a little bit more to Excel. And then we have budget and resource management. And so whether your resources are people, whether those resources are equipment or other hardware, or you're managing budget across, other major accounts, there are other tools that you can leverage, and you can have a different team template around budget and resource management as well. And then portfolio versus project. And so a lot of PMOs have a need of being able to roll up all of the different projects to check status and health of all of the different projects that may fall under their umbrella. And so having, Power BI dashboards and having some other mechanisms that are in place for that type of roll-up activity, I think are also great use cases in using Teams for project management too. So as you start to think about taking Teams to the next level for your project, I often try to ask these 3 questions and to kind of pose it in these 3 columns. So to think about repeatability, to think about findability, and to think about automation. So these are sort of, business cases, if you will, whys for using Teams and setting up something like a template for project management that could be helpful. So from a repeatability standpoint, we have project types, and I like to use in the US we have a standard for CMMI, which is different project management standards and compliance measures. Sometimes you need a folder structure, a very prescriptive folder structure that allows for you to be compliant against a set of standards that you're trying to adhere to. And that ties in with perhaps using, findability and having content types, or having other types of document management schemas that you're using out of SharePoint that help you with that, that project type. Folder structures, so process, having repeatability, having a common folder structure that you want flowing through each and every project so that there's consistency and traceability if there's an audit of some sort. Thinking about findability, Teams tabs are great. Teams tabs are great to link to some of those other apps. And again, I encourage you to research the level of maturity of those Teams connectors. And then content types, leveraging the features within a SharePoint document library, like for content types and metadata application to help with the findability of the content later. Automation, I think, is also really cool and an important piece to this puzzle, and why you would want to bring project management into Teams. So approvals and routing and the use of bots are also really great. So planning your project hub, you've got your list of apps that you may use, your company may use already. And then, thinking about documents, is there a repeating document folder structure that you want to add? Is there metadata that would be beneficial to the documents if you added them? Do you want to quarantine off a backstage and a front stage, depending on who is interacting in your team and how your project doers interact with some of the stakeholders for the project, for instance? Having document templates and leveraging content types, and then also using any automation, Power Automate for routing, process, and approvals. Then we have conversations, so easy links to docs, easy links to tasks, using bots, and then the beauty of threaded conversations. So then we have creating Teams templates for your project management. And I know that this is a little bit of an eye chart, but I love a mind map. And there can be many different ways that you can represent this type of feature, but you can start to think about the different Teams templates that might exist in your organization in a couple of different ways. And I was just trying to highlight some ways that you could think about ways to kind of quarantine off or siphon off and figure out what your project types are. But this is a great way of then kind of mapping out, what are the project templates that we might want to have. And within that specialization, how do we start to think about what all the channels are going to be for? And within that channel, what are the tabs that we want to have? Within each of those different channels, are there structures for the files that we want to have? Do we want them to really only just use the general channel? Do we want to have a front stage and a backstage? Do we want to use private channels as part of this? And so a mind map is a really great way to start thinking about how you're planning those pieces out and what you want that user experience to be. So now we get to building templates in Teams. And this is a really cool feature that I like that's come out. And so it's using shared templates between Teams and SharePoint. And I like to break it down this way because they kind of do different things that all help you get to your ultimate goal of being able to create these sophisticated templates that have the level of detail and requirements that you need. And so you want to create a SharePoint site template. And this is really so that you can format the document library to include the content types that you want. So you can create and design the content types, including any document templates that you want to make available, any metadata or columns, any filters or views that you want to apply to the content. Because like it or not, most of the document management features are still in SharePoint. And so while Documents consumes it into Teams, all the controls and the ability to templatize those pieces are reside with a SharePoint site template. And so then you can then move to creating your Teams template. And this is going to be a direct result of your mind map planning. And you can take your mind map planning and start to design and build out what your Teams template will be, and then saving that as a Teams template. And so you leverage the shared templates between Teams and SharePoint to refer to a SharePoint site template for the document for the connected site to that team. And voila, you got a Teams template that leverages also the SharePoint site template for the document management capabilities. So leveraging other apps in Teams. So planner or project. I think this is usually a pretty easy question to answer. However, some organizations are diehard projects. Some don't want to pay for it. I've used Project quite a bit, and you can add MS Project as a tab, but because of its because of the additional licensing that is required for Project, not everyone may have access to Project, and so that might be a differentiating factor right there. But Planner is a really easy way of doing some very light project management and some very light task management. A lot of organizations, and I've used Trello some, but in my experience, and also in a lot of the companies that I've worked with, they have there are a lot of similarities between Trello and Planner. I think Trello has some additional advanced capabilities that Planner may not have. But the integration of Planner within M365 and the fact that it comes with the suite, the enterprise licensing, often makes it a really natural solution and tool to be able to consume and leverage easy task management for a number of different scenarios. And so Planner is a really great one to use. And so then you can also, access the App Store, not knowing, I know that every tenant, you can set the App Store settings specifically and tailor it to your user base. So you may not have access to everything that is out there, and it might be something if you learn about a connector for for one of these project management tools, and it's an app in the App Store for Teams, but you don't see it. It might be something that your organization has not made visible to you, and so it's good to talk to your Teams administrator to see if it's possible to get access to that connector and that app. But just browsing through the store is one easy way of being able to start there and take a look. I highlight Azure DevOps, and we're an Azure DevOps house over at Avanade, Microsoft tools, and I really enjoy using Azure DevOps. It's a great way to manage a project, and it's a great way of keeping everyone together, especially with software development projects. And you can leverage Azure DevOps, and it integrates with Teams very nicely. And so you can pull in requests, you can do code commits, you can monitor builds, you can give work item updates, and they show up also through the Teams interface. And so that's a very nice integration point. Smartsheet is also a really nice tool to use as well. And I've used Smartsheet in lieu of Microsoft Project. And so it provides you with that project schedule view and the Gantt chart view without all of the additional depth that you get with Project that you may or may not need. Also, I've seen and have done some automation within Smartsheets that outside of Teams still functions when you leverage the integration, and those can be some really nice ways of adding automation, bringing in Smartsheet, but still leveraging Teams as like your document repository and conversations. All right, so I have a couple of case studies to share just to give you a couple of ideas on how some folks are leveraging Teams for project management. So this is a financial services institution in the U.S., an investment firm. They manage about $3 trillion in assets. So they're a fairly large, prominent financial services company. And they set up Teams for project management within their enterprise collaboration space. And their intent with this was to make Teams that single pane of glass for their folks. The application list that they have, you can see that in the middle. They have a number of different apps that all coincide with what they're doing for a project. So they leverage Excel for project scheduling and to manage the project dates, start end dates, level of effort, resources, and party responsible. And then they also use set up Confluence pages for their SOPs. They leverage Jira for task management and story and epic management. And then it all ties back to their ServiceNow so that whatever they implement and whatever they're creating, it fits back into their overall operation schema. And so they set things up a little differently at first. So they had a separate SharePoint online document library that they initially kicked off using. And so they had a separate tab to this other library that existed in a SharePoint site that was not the SharePoint connected site to the team. And so they, they had a little duplicity because there was a documents tab, and then they had another tab that going to another document repository. And that was okay because their teams knew about it. But it is, for their growth plans and how they plan to evolve this, it is something that they're looking to migrate the files from that other document library into the SharePoint connected site into that team, for that team, so that there's only one document repository. And then they're going to be also creating some ServiceNow dashboards. So as their project evolves, as they move from an initial project state to more of a manage and run state, they are going to add some of those dashboards, ServiceNow dashboards, into other tabs, and leverage adaptive cards for some of the function support requests, so that they're able to keep track of what the health is of that particular function. And then and I know this because this is a little dated at this point. They've created templates for these teams, and it's specifically for their enterprise collaboration team. And so that's they've taken those and they've repeated those pieces, and they've created a Teams template out of that, so they can always spin up a new team, and it has links and connection points to the various applications that are important to their projects. And then the last case study that I have to share with you is for Children's Hospital team. And so this is for the team is the therapeutics team, and they manage clinical trials and drug development. And that team, as they're creating doing clinical trials and drug development, they're creating controlled documents. These documents contain the recipes for these various drugs and for the processes and for the process to build them and whatnot. And so these controlled documents actually can't be stored in SharePoint. However, they wanted a better way to keep track of all the requests that they have for these controlled documents. So whenever they go to manufacture the drug, they have to make a request to get a copy of the controlled document, or to have the controlled document sent to the drug manufacturer. And so they wanted a space, a team space, where they would be able to manage those requests, have automated requests, and the ability to track those requests and their fulfillment. So a lot of Power Apps, some Power Automate for workflow automation, they have links in the document library to those controlled documents, so they have a catalog of those controlled documents in the document library, but taking you to the location of where the controlled document is, and also a list for training, because everyone who is on that team has to have very rigorous training around those controlled documents to make sure that there's compliance and it follows the regulations that they are subject to. So so they set up the Power Automate and Power Apps, and they're managing the requests, the fulfillment, and also the training coordination and validation for those control documents in this one team, which is really cool. And so I know that right now they are in the process. They're implementing DocuSign and syncing the DocuSign to a different channel for training against those control documents, so that they're able to coordinate and make sure that the DocuSign validation and the signed copy goes into that other channel. And then there's also a spreadsheet, or there's a list that shows all of the participants and whether or not they have taken the training and signed the document or not. So their other growth plan is that they want some additional dashboards that show some of the movement of all those different pieces. All right. Well, I hope that this has been a helpful conversation to get you started and to help think through different ways you can leverage Teams for project management. I really appreciate your time and attention and for attending. And I also